Okay, so picture this: my sister Chloe is about to get married, and everything's supposed to be perfect, like straight out of a magazine. But here's the twist: she's banned my 7-year-old daughter, Mia, from the wedding, and yeah, I'm the one footing the $25,000 catering bill. So, yeah, things are already tense. I mean, family drama, weddings, kids. It's a mix you don't want to miss. Stick around, because what happens next is wild. By the way, I'm curious, where are you all watching from today? Drop it in the comments. So, it all started with Mabel's birthday parties. Every year, Chloe noticed this weird pattern. Mabel, my sister, would host these elaborate, adults-only birthday celebrations for her own kids, Max and Ava. And honestly, they were beautiful events. The decorations were always perfect, the music carefully curated, the food on point. But every single year, there was this rule: kids weren't allowed. At first, Chloe thought it was just a general thing. Maybe Mabel wanted a grown-up atmosphere. Right. So, she brushed it off, thinking, well, okay, that makes sense. Adults can talk, kids can run around and ruin the vibe. I get it. But the more Chloe paid attention, the more she noticed something that didn't quite add up. It wasn't that the rule applied to all children. It was specific. Jennifer. Her daughter, my niece, was never welcome. And not just at birthdays, but at these little casual gatherings too. Every time there was a party, Jennifer would get the polite, careful brush off, while Max and Ava were right in the middle of it, giggling, opening presents, being celebrated. At first, Chloe tried to rationalize it. Maybe Jennifer was younger. Maybe it was about the timing or logistics. She clung to every tiny explanation that could make this feel normal. But deep down, she felt that prick of unease, that subtle twinge in her chest that whispered, wait a minute, this isn't fair. And it wasn't just a feeling, it was an observation she couldn't ignore. Every year, Mabel would plan a special day for Max and Ava. She'd send out invites, decorate the house, hire entertainers, the works. Chloe would watch from the sidelines, sometimes helping a little, sometimes just observing. And every time, the same story: Jennifer didn't fit. She didn't get an invite, a role, or even a mention in the little toasts Mabel would make. And here's the thing: Mabel always had a reason, a polite justification. Oh, it's for age-appropriate activities, or we need a quiet environment for the cake cutting, or, well, Jennifer would get bored anyway, and Chloe would nod, smile, agree, because it was Mabel. Mabel had this way of making logic sound natural, like everyone should see things her way. But it wasn't just that Jennifer was excluded, it was the inconsistency, the hypocrisy that stung. Max and Ava could run around, make noise, even throw tantrums, and it was fine. It was celebrated almost. But Jennifer, any small act of childhood excitement was reason enough to say, nope, this isn't for you. Chloe started noticing the micro moments too. The way Mabel's eyes softened when Max tripped over the cake table, versus the quick, almost imperceptible glance of impatience when Jennifer even approached a balloon. The way Mabel's voice would rise in excitement for Ava's party games, and the careful, muted tone when Jennifer wanted to join. At first, Chloe tried to push it down. She told herself it didn't matter, that she was imagining things. She told herself that maybe it was just the nature of siblings' favoritism, quirks, old habits. But the moments kept piling up, little by little, like drops in a bucket. And the thing about human nature is, when you see a pattern long enough, it doesn't take long for that bucket to overflow. Chloe found herself waiting for the next event, almost dreading it because she knew what to expect. Max and Ava, loud and laughing, enveloped in attention. Jennifer, standing on the edge, watching, sometimes whispering to Chloe, sometimes tugging at her hand. And every year, it became harder for Chloe to ignore it. There was this slow, creeping resentment, the kind that starts subtle and quiet and then, eventually, has its own voice. She caught herself thinking, why does this happen every single year? Why is Jennifer always the exception? And the more she thought, the more the frustration mingled with guilt. She hated feeling resentful toward her sister, but she couldn't deny it. It was there, sharp as a needle under the skin. And there were moments where it hit Chloe with full force. She'd be watching the kids play, the adults laughing, and Jennifer would be hovering by the edge of the room. Sometimes she'd make a little joke, hoping to be included, and Mabel would laugh politely, but never actually involve her. Chloe felt it in her stomach, a heavy, sinking sensation that wasn't just concern for Jennifer, but a realization of the emotional divide Mabel was creating. And here's the thing, Chloe wasn't naive. She'd grown up observing Mabel, and she knew the difference between accidental exclusion and deliberate. This wasn't oversight, it was a consistent, reinforced rule. And that understanding made it sting even more. Chloe also noticed the little social cues. The way the adult guests would unconsciously align with Mabel's preferences. The way they'd naturally gravitate to Max and Ava. And the subtle awkwardness whenever Jennifer tried to participate. It wasn't overt cruelty from the other adults. They were just mirroring Mabel's lead, but it amplified the exclusion. And Chloe felt each moment like a weight on her chest. And every year, there was this quiet battle inside her. She wanted to step in, to say something, to pull Jennifer into the fun, but she didn't. Or rather, she tried, and Mabel had this way of shutting it down, of framing Chloe's interventions as unnecessary or overprotective. It was subtle, almost polite, but still piercing. Chloe's internal struggle was exhausting. She wanted to be the adult who understood, who let things slide. She wanted to rationalize it, but she couldn't. And the more she observed, the more the resentment layered itself over her careful, rational explanations. She started noticing patterns in conversations, too. The way Mabel would talk about Max and Ava's personalities, always framing them as delightful, charming, easygoing. Jennifer. She was framed as challenging, unpredictable, difficult, always needing a different approach. And Chloe knew her niece was none of those things. She was bright, imaginative, affectionate, and the unfair framing hurt. It hurt because it was subtle enough to pass as care, but consistent enough to feel intentional. And that subtlety was what gnawed at Chloe. She started thinking about the emotional lessons being taught to Jennifer, about feeling second best, always on the edge, always needing permission to be part of the fun, and it made her heart ache. Chloe also realized that Mabel's rule wasn't just about the birthday parties. It bled into other social settings and neighborhood gatherings, school events, even casual play dates. Jennifer was the odd one out, always the exception, and Chloe couldn't stop noticing it. Each new instance, each new exclusion, layered onto the last, and the quiet frustration inside Chloe began transforming into this simmering, uncomfortable awareness. It was a mix of protectiveness, confusion, and the beginnings of a quiet, simmering anger. And yet, she still tried to reconcile it. She'd ask herself, is this really a big deal? Is this just childhood? Is this just personality differences? She'd look at Jennifer and see her laughter, her energy, and think, maybe it doesn't matter. But then, almost immediately, a new instance would occur, and the doubt would vanish. It wasn't just a feeling, it was a pattern, and it was clear. And Chloe started noticing her own reactions, the tiny moments of irritation she felt toward Mabel, the small, suppressed sighs, the little inward rolls of the eyes when yet another adults-only rule was enforced. She didn't like feeling that way because she loved her sister, but she couldn't lie to herself anymore. It was real, and it was shaping the way she approached every event, every conversation. And over time, it started to change her, subtly, quietly, without her even realizing. The way she positioned herself at gatherings, the way she tried to make sure Jennifer wasn't overlooked, the small gestures she added to try and balance the scales. And Chloe also noticed how exhausted she was emotionally, constantly monitoring, stepping in, softening moments, translating Mabel's intentions to make Jennifer feel included. It was draining, but necessary. And with that exhaustion came a new kind of clarity. Chloe began to accept the truth, even as it hurt. She couldn't control Mabel, couldn't change her rules, but she could control how she showed up for Jennifer. She could protect, support, and validate her niece, even if Mabel wouldn't. And in that acceptance, Chloe felt a strange mix of resolve and sadness. Acknowledge the hypocrisy, recognize the unfairness, and still act with love. It was complicated, heavy, and quietly infuriating, but it was also empowering. Chloe realized she was shaping a space where Jennifer could feel seen, even when the official rules said otherwise. And every birthday party, every event, became this careful dance of navigating Mabel's rules, protecting Jennifer, and maintaining some semblance of harmony. It was exhausting, but it was necessary. And slowly, quietly, Chloe's subtle resentment transformed into a focused, protective energy. She was aware of Mabel's favoritism, the hypocrisy, the exclusion, and she carried it with her, not as anger to be thrown around, but as vigilance. She learned to read the cues, anticipate the moments, and step in only when it mattered most. And in that quiet, it's consistent effort, she started to feel a small, growing satisfaction. The satisfaction wasn't about proving Mabel wrong. It was about making sure Jennifer felt valued, seen, and included, even in tiny ways. And that small satisfaction became a quiet, guiding force for Chloe, shaping her interactions, her patience, and her resolve. Over time, Chloe could see the pattern clearly. Mabel's adults-only rule wasn't about adults. It was about control, about exclusion, about a selective definition of who deserved attention and celebration. And Chloe, watching closely, quietly vowed that Jennifer would never feel the sting of that rule again, even if it meant quietly building little pockets of joy for her, little secret celebrations, small gestures that reminded her niece she mattered. And that's how Chloe navigated the world of Mabel's parties, observing, noticing, protecting, and slowly, steadily, building a quiet rebellion of inclusion for Jennifer. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was powerful. Chloe learned that you could resist quietly, thoughtfully, and with love. And in the process, she discovered a new, deeper layer of her own resilience. She saw the hypocrisy, acknowledged it, felt the resentment, and yet chose action, compassion, and quiet courage over confrontation. And in that choice, Chloe started reshaping the narrative, one small moment at a time. Year after year, it was the same story, and Chloe began to notice it more and more, like a recurring scene in a movie she couldn't turn away from. Mabel would host these parties for Max and Ava, and they were always perfectly orchestrated, every balloon, every streamer, every little cake carefully measured to create this picture of joy and perfection. But there was one consistent, glaring omission. Jennifer. She was left out every time. Chloe had watched the pattern for years, and at first, she tried to tell herself it wasn't personal. Maybe it was logistical. Maybe Jennifer was too young. Maybe she got overstimulated. Maybe Mabel just wanted a quiet atmosphere for the adults. She clung to these rationalizations because admitting the truth hurt too much. It wasn't just a birthday party, it was a ritual. A yearly reminder that Jennifer didn't belong in the same way as Max and Ava. And the more Chloe observed, the more the injustice became undeniable. The other kids would arrive and be immediately swept into the festivities, hugging relatives, laughing with cousins, opening presents under Mabel's attentive gaze. Their every action seemed celebrated, their voices amplified in the symphony of joy. And Jennifer, she would arrive, often shy, hopeful, and immediately confronted with this invisible wall. Mabel's polite smile, the half-hearted invitation to join, the careful redirection to a corner or quiet activity, it all added up. And Chloe could feel Jennifer's disappointment like a weight pressing against her chest. She could see it in the way Jennifer's lips tightened when a balloon drifted out of reach, in the hesitation when she tried to peek into a game, in the tiny stifled sighs that betrayed the heartbreak she was learning to mask. Chloe tried to intervene sometimes, gently coaxing her niece into a game, making a joke to draw her attention, offering her a front row seat at the cake cutting. But Mabel had this way of steering the scene back to her children, subtly, naturally, making Chloe's attempts seem unnecessary or overbearing. It was infuriating. And every year, Chloe found herself walking a tightrope between protecting Jennifer and maintaining the fragile social harmony. And Albert noticed it too. He was Chloe's cousin, a quiet observer, the type who sees more than he says. The first time he mentioned it, it was casual, almost hesitant. Is it just me? Or does Jennifer never get to, he's really join in, he asked, as if afraid to offend anyone. And that small acknowledgement, so seemingly trivial, validated Chloe's growing sense of discomfort. It wasn't in her head. Something was off. But Chloe, again, tried to rationalize. She reminded herself of all the reasons Mabel had offered over the years. She told herself Jennifer might genuinely prefer quieter spaces, that it wasn't an exclusion, just an adult preference, a parenting choice, logistics, anything to make the sting less sharp. Yet, even as she tried, the pattern persisted, repeating like a metronome she couldn't turn off. Chloe started paying closer attention to the micro moments, the subtle signals that exposed the truth, the way Mabel's eyes would brighten for Max and Ava, soften in that indulgent, affectionate way, but tighten just slightly when Jennifer approached, the way she celebrated even their minor mishaps, while any small mistake by Jennifer was met with a delicate correction or a careful redirect. And the other adults, even if unintentionally, mirrored these cues, reinforcing the exclusion. Chloe saw the differences in treatment everywhere. The excitement for Max as he tore into his presence, the gentle encouragement of Ava during the party games, the careful orchestration of their laughter into the perfect background for photos. And Jennifer, she hovered, sometimes trying to participate, sometimes retreating quietly to the edges, adjusting her dress, smoothing her hair, trying to appear calm when inside she was hurting. It was subtle, almost invisible to the casual observer, but Chloe felt every nuance like a pulse of injustice that refused to fade. And with every passing year, Chloe's awareness grew sharper. It wasn't accidental, she realized. It was intentional. Mabel's rule was a barrier, specifically constructed to exclude Jennifer. It wasn't about age or noise or maturity as it was personal. And that realization brought with it a new layer of discomfort, a moral conflict that Chloe wrestled with constantly. On the one hand, she wanted to respect her sister, to maintain peace, to let the adults handle their parties however they chose. On the other, she felt the weight of fairness, of right and wrong pressing on her. And watching Jennifer experience that exclusion tore at her in ways Chloe couldn't ignore. She started noticing the emotional toll on Jennifer, the quiet hesitation at the start of each party, the brief moments of forced cheer when she tried to fit in, the sighs of disappointment as games moved out of reach. Chloe felt it in her own chest, a mix of sadness, frustration, and helplessness. She hated the way Jennifer had to navigate the world carefully, to self-regulate in anticipation of exclusion, to constantly measure her own actions against an invisible standard set by Mabel. And the more Chloe observed, the more she noticed the creeping resentment in herself. She didn't like feeling it, but she couldn't deny it. It was subtle, simmering, almost unspoken, but undeniably present. A quiet awareness that the rules weren't neutral, that the children weren't treated equally, and that Mabel's preferences had little to do with reason and everything to do with control. And there were moments, small and fleeting, when Chloe would confront Mabel gently, asking if perhaps Jennifer could join in a game or be part of the photo. And every time, Mabel's answer was polite, measured, carefully worded, but dismissive. Oh, she wouldn't enjoy this part, she'd say, or it's just too loud. I think she'd rather watch quietly. And Chloe would nod, smile, let it go. But inside, the frustration coiled tighter. She began to see patterns in conversations and choices too. The way Mabel praised Max and Ava for being charming, easygoing, and delightful, always highlighting their strengths. While Jennifer was framed as unpredictable, difficult, or in need of special handling, Chloe knew her niece was none of those things. Yet the narrative was reinforced again and again, subtly, invisibly, yet powerfully. Chloe felt a complicated mix of emotions, protectiveness, sorrow, frustration, and the beginnings of anger. She started to watch herself as closely as she watched Mabel, noticing her own reactions, the small sighs she tried to suppress, the inward groans when yet another adults-only rule was enforced, the private, almost imperceptible roll of her eyes when Mabel spoke about party logistics, framing Jennifer as unfit to participate. Chloe didn't like these feelings, but she knew they were honest, and she couldn't push them aside. She began keeping mental notes, observing each detail, cataloging each moment of exclusion, Each micro inequity, each subtle preference, and in that careful observation, a quiet clarity began to emerge. She realized she didn't have to accept the unfairness. She could act, even if subtly, to protect Jennifer. And that understanding, while heavy, brought a kind of resolve. She could navigate Mabel's world, respect her boundaries, but also quietly carve out a space where Jennifer felt seen, valued, and included. Over time, Chloe noticed a strange rhythm to the parties. The initial excitement, the focus on Max and Ava, the careful steering away of Jennifer, and then the small, discreet interventions Chloe would make guiding Jennifer toward a better view of the games, encouraging her to try the cake first, whispering little words of reassurance when she felt left out. And with each year, these moments became more deliberate, more conscious. Chloe was learning to act in a way that countered the pattern, even if it was small and almost invisible to anyone else. The emotional toll was significant. Chloe carried it with her for days afterward, replaying the events in her mind, assessing how she could improve the next intervention, how she can make Jennifer feel included without making Mabel feel undermined. It was exhausting, but it was also meaningful. And slowly, the quiet frustration she had been feeling transformed into something else, something more focused, more protective. She wasn't just frustrated anymore. She was vigilant. She was prepared. She was aware, every year, of the potential for exclusion, and she was ready to counter it in small, intentional ways. And in that vigilance, Chloe found a strange sense of empowerment. She couldn't change Mabel, couldn't rewrite the rules she had set for her own children, couldn't alter the adults-only edict in the broader sense. But she could ensure that Jennifer felt acknowledged, cared for, and loved within the constraints of the party, and that subtle, quiet, loving defiance became her personal mission, shaping her behavior, her emotional energy, and her interactions with Jennifer. Chloe began to anticipate the micro moments before they happened, reading Mabel's cues, understanding the flow of the party, preparing ways to insert small victories of joy for her niece. And in doing so, she started to see a small, growing satisfaction each year. A sense that despite the exclusion, Jennifer's experience could still be meaningful, positive, and full of warmth. Chloe could see the hypocrisy for what it was: personal, deliberate, unfair. But she also understood her own power within that structure. She could not change the adults-only label, but she could ensure Jennifer's emotional experience was rich and nurturing. And in the quiet, simmering frustration, in the moral conflict and emotional exhaustion, Chloe found a purpose to be the buffer, the advocate, and the protector. She became hyper-aware of every glance, every tone, every subtle prioritization of Max and Ava over Jennifer. And she responded not with anger toward Mabel, but with careful, intentional care for her niece. And over time, this awareness, this vigilance became almost instinctive. Chloe could navigate each party like a chess game, anticipating every move, every exclusion, every potential moment of hurt, and positioning herself to intervene in ways that were supportive, yet non-confrontational. And through it all, she learned patience, subtlety, and the quiet strength that comes from protecting someone you love in a world where rules are arbitrary, inconsistent, and sometimes cruel. Chloe's journey through these recurring patterns of exclusion wasn't easy, wasn't glamorous, and wasn't dramatic in a visible way. but it was profound. She learned about human behavior, about favoritism, about subtle manipulation, and about resilience. And she also learned about love, the kind that is patient, enduring, and quietly revolutionary in its insistence that a child deserves to be seen and valued, no matter what the adults say. It was the morning of Ava's third birthday, and the park was buzzing with that crisp, almost electric anticipation that comes with little kids and balloons. Chloe was driving there with Jennifer in the back seat, and the excitement radiating off her daughter was contagious. Jennifer had been talking about the party for days, bouncing from topic to topic, her words tumbling out in a mix of joy and curiosity. She asked about the games, the cake, the presents, and Chloe found herself nodding along, giving just enough detail to keep the excitement alive. But here's the catch: Chloe knew she was lying. Well, not lying exactly, but bending the truth so carefully that it didn't sound like deception. At least she hoped it didn't. She told Jennifer that it was a special day, that there were other kids there to play with, that there would be fun for everyone, all without mentioning the one critical detail: Jennifer wasn't actually invited. She tried to keep her voice light, upbeat, casual, sprinkling in little anecdotes about how fun the park would be. The way the sunshine would hit the swings, the giggles echoing across the playground. And Jennifer, oblivious, beamed in response, nodding eagerly, cheeks flushed with excitement. Chloe watched her closely, the tiny hands gripping the seatbelt, the eyes sparkling with anticipation, and felt a pang in her chest. Every word of the half-truth she spoke carried weight, each one a step deeper into this precarious balancing act between protecting her daughter and keeping the peace. The closer they got to the park, the more Chloe's heart raced, a tight knot forming in her stomach. She imagined Jennifer running ahead, mingling with kids she didn't know, trying to join in games that weren't hers to join. Her mind spun scenarios, each more painful than the last, and she realized how fragile this moment was. One misstep, one word, and the truth would shatter the illusion she'd been carefully maintaining. When they arrived, the party was already in full swing. Max and Ava were in the center, surrounded by parents and kids, balloons tied to strollers and benches, laughter floating in the warm morning air. Chloe parked the car and turned to Jennifer, forcing a smile she didn't feel. "Ready to go have some fun?" she asked. Jennifer practically leapt out of the seat, eyes wide, and nodded enthusiastically. But then came the moment Chloe had been dreading. Jennifer noticed the other kids. She noticed the way Mabel was holding Ava, the way Max was laughing with the older children, and a tiny frown began to crease her forehead. Chloe felt a sharp pang, realizing how quickly Jennifer could connect the dots, how fast the fragile little bubble of excitement could burst. Chloe tried to steer her gently, to distract her with comments about the swings, about the slide, about a game of tag she could play with a friend she made on the way. But Jennifer's curiosity was relentless. She asked about Ava, about the birthday girl, and Chloe's stomach twisted. She gave vague, careful answers, focusing on fun, on sunshine, on laughter, but avoiding the central truth. And it was exhausting. Every word she said was measured, every smile a mask, every nod a careful calculation. The tension grew with each passing minute, and Chloe could feel her own pulse thumping in her temples. And then it happened. The moment she had feared, the split second when the world tilted and Jennifer understood. It wasn't immediate, but it was inevitable as Chloe carried Jennifer to the side to a quieter part of the playground. She overheard her daughter ask another child about Ava's birthday. The response, casual and unthinking, hit Chloe like a jolt. The child mentioned that Jennifer wasn't invited. The words hung in the air, thick and heavy, and Chloe could see the light in Jennifer's eyes dim, the sparkle fade, replaced by confusion and hurt. Chloe's chest tightened, her heart lurched, a mix of panic, anger, and disbelief swirling inside her. How could Mabel do this? How could she construct this elaborate celebration for her own children, while excluding Jennifer so deliberately? Chloe felt a rising tide of fury, the kind that makes your hands clench and your jaw ache, and yet she had to remain calm, composed, for Jennifer's sake. Jennifer looked up at her, eyes wide, a mix of shock and sadness. Chloe's throat tightened. She swallowed hard, forcing her voice steady, soft, gentle. "Sweetie, it's okay. It's not what you think." But even as she said it, she knew it was a thin veil over the truth, barely holding back the reality of Mabel's deliberate exclusion. Jennifer's lips trembled, her small hands clutching Chloe's arm, and Chloe felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. She had to protect her, comfort her, explain in a way that didn't compound the hurt. And yet, the truth was undeniable. Chloe felt the internal panic rising, the sick, queasy churn of anger and helplessness, and she realized that Mabel's actions weren't just a minor oversight or an innocent mistake. They were intentional, personal, targeted, and the betrayal was sharp, like a blade she couldn't ignore. She guided Jennifer to the edge of the playground, crouching to meet her gaze, brushing a curl back from her forehead. "I know this feels confusing," Chloe whispered, her voice trembling despite the careful control. Jennifer's eyes filled with unshed tears, and Chloe's chest tightened further. She had to hold it together, had to craft an explanation that wouldn't wound further. But the words felt inadequate, hollow. The realization of what Mabel had done, what she had engineered every year, every party, every gathering settled over Chloe like a heavy fog. It was deliberate exclusion, wrapped in politeness and veneer of justification. And Chloe felt the moral weight pressing down. She wanted to scream at Mabel, to confront her, to demand an explanation, but she couldn't. Not here, not in front of Jennifer, not in the middle of a sunny park filled with oblivious families and the laughter of other children. Instead, she held Jennifer close, whispering small reassurances, soft words to soothe the sudden sting of rejection. She promised that it wasn't Jennifer's fault, that she was loved, valued, and important. And inside, Chloe's mind raced with plans, with strategies for how to navigate these moments in the future, how to protect her daughter from these repeated injustices, how to maintain some semblance of emotional equilibrium in a family that's so clearly divided by arbitrary rules. And there was the added, bitter layer of complexity, the social expectations, the judgment of other parents, the unspoken rules of politeness and decorum that constrained Chloe's reactions. She had to smile, nod, engage, all while her heart burned with frustration and righteous anger. And Jennifer, perceptive even in her young age, asked quiet questions. The small, piercing questions that cut Chloe to the core. "Why didn't they invite me?" she whispered, voice trembling. Chloe's mind scrambled for words, for explanations that wouldn't wound, that wouldn't add to the sting. She tried small fibs, tiny half-truths, weaving a narrative that sounded plausible. The park was crowded. There were too many kids, some games were for different age groups, that they wanted a special activity for the birthday girl. But even as she spoke, she knew the truth would out. Children have a way of sensing reality, and Jennifer's intuition was sharp. And sure enough, it came the car ride home when Jennifer pieced it together. Chloe had driven slowly, avoiding the direct confrontation for as long as possible, but the moment was inevitable. Jennifer's small voice broke through the hum of the engine. "Mommy, they didn't want me there. Did they?" The words landed with a thud, and Chloe felt her stomach twist, her chest constrict. She glanced at her daughter in the rearview mirror, saw the tears threatening to spill, and felt a mix of guilt, shame, and anger that left her breathless. Her fingers gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles white, as she fought to control the rising tide of emotion. She wanted to cry, to scream, to throttle Mabel for this deliberate cruelty, but she knew that none of that would help Jennifer in this moment. Instead, Chloe swallowed hard, exhaling slowly, and forced a calmness she didn't feel. "Sweetheart, it's okay," she said, voice soft but trembling. "It's not your fault. Sometimes adults make choices that aren't fair, and that's all this is. It doesn't mean you did anything wrong." But even as she said it, she felt the heat of anger toward Mabel, a simmering rage that made her want to pull over and confront her sister right there on the side of the road. Chloe realized, in that moment, that this wasn't a one-off, that this pattern had been repeating for years, and it was intentional, personal. The truth settled over her like a storm cloud. Mabel had engineered this exclusion, and she had done it with meticulous care, ensuring that Jennifer felt left out, unseen, and unwanted. And the tension in the family dynamic, always present but subtle, now felt thick and almost physical. Chloe's mind raced, balancing the need to protect Jennifer with the desire to confront Mabel, the need to maintain civility with the need to assert moral clarity. She felt a knot of emotions: anger, panic, frustration, love, guilt twisting together in a way that made it hard to breathe. And yet, she held her daughter close, whispered small words of comfort, brushed the tears from her face, and promised that she would always be seen, always be included, always be loved. And in that quiet, tense car ride home, Chloe's understanding crystallized. Mabel's behavior wasn't just an odd rule. It was a deliberate act of exclusion, and Jennifer deserved protection, validation, and love in the face of it. Chloe knew she would carry this knowledge forward, that it would shape how she navigated family events, celebrations, and gatherings for years to come. And she vowed, silently, that she would never let Jennifer feel this kind of rejection again. It started with a few messages, small ones at first. Casual texts from other moms Chloe knew. Nothing alarming, just little check-ins, comments about birthday parties, weekend plans, things that seemed ordinary. But as she read, a pattern began to emerge. Subtle at first, almost imperceptible, and then unmistakable. The messages hinted at a narrative she hadn't seen coming. Mabel had been telling them, the other parents, little stories about Chloe, painting her as cold, distant, career-focused, someone who didn't prioritize her daughter's social life. At first, Chloe froze, scrolling through the threads, rereading them, trying to make sense of it. Could this really be happening? Could Mabel actually be spinning these tales, fabricating a version of her that served some personal agenda, just to make Jennifer look like the problem, or to justify the exclusions she'd enforced every year? Her fingers trembled over her phone as the pieces clicked together. Suddenly, every awkward glance, every subtle sidestep at the parties, every carefully framed excuse for why Jennifer couldn't participate started to make sense. It wasn't just oversight, it wasn't just a rule, it was calculated, deliberate, a strategy Mabel had perfected over years. Chloe felt a cold spike of anger, followed quickly by a kind of stunned disbelief. How had she not seen this sooner? She had trusted Mabel, had rationalized her actions, had told herself it was all logistical, harmless, maybe even for the best. But now, with these messages laid bare, the reality hit like a ton of bricks. Mabel had been manipulating the perception of everyone around her, shaping narratives, twisting facts, and deliberately positioning Jennifer as the outlier. And Chloe could see it in her mind's eye every birthday party, every play date, every whispered excuse, the subtle cues that seemed trivial before the polite corrections. The redirection of attention, the exclusions that had always felt wrong were now unmistakably part of a pattern. And it wasn't just minor manipulation. Mabel had crafted a story about Chloe too, turning her into this distant, work-obsessed parent, someone incapable of prioritizing her child, all to justify her own actions, to make Jennifer's exclusion look necessary or reasonable in the eyes of others. Chloe's chest tightened, a low, simmering frustration that she couldn't shake. How could someone go to such lengths? How could they construct an entire web of lies, carefully calibrated to isolate a child and tarnish the reputation of a parent? The anger was there, sharp and immediate, but underneath it was a deeper, more troubling ache. She thought of Jennifer, her bright, trusting daughter, and the quiet heartbreak she had seen on her face at every party, every event. She thought of the confusions, the little hesitations, the attempts to rationalize her own exclusion, and Chloe's heart ached for the injustice, the sheer unfairness of it all. But anger alone wasn't enough. Chloe felt a surge of determination, a resolve that burned behind her eyes. She couldn't let this continue. She couldn't allow Mabel to manipulate, to exclude, to shape perceptions and hurt her daughter. Not now, not ever. And she realized, with a clarity that cut through the haze of disbelief, that action was necessary. She had to protect Jennifer, to validate her, to ensure that she understood she was loved and valued, even when the adults around her failed. The messages painted a clear picture, and Chloe saw the pattern of calculation behind Mabel's behavior. It wasn't accidental. It wasn't even unconscious. It was strategic. And in that strategy lay the root of all the tension Chloe had felt for years. The sense that something was wrong, that the world wasn't fair. Now she understood why every party, every invitation, every exclusion felt so deliberate, so suffocating, so deeply personal. Chloe felt her mind racing, trying to process all the implications. Every smile Mabel had flashed, Every carefully crafted explanation, every subtle manipulation, it was all part of a deliberate campaign to shape reality in her favor, to position Jennifer as the problem and Chloe herself as a distant and attentive parent. And in that realization, Chloe felt a strange mix of emotions: shock, anger, disbelief, and a grim sense of clarity. The panic that had gnawed at her chest over the years was now fueled by insight. And with that insight came a clear direction she would act. She would step in. She would protect her daughter. She would counteract the lies, the manipulations, and the exclusions. It was personal now, undeniably so. And Chloe knew she couldn't sit back anymore. She reflected on the past events, the subtle signs she had ignored, the rationalizations she'd clung to. Each excuse, each justification suddenly appeared in a new light, stark and unrelenting. And she understood, painfully, how deep Mabel's strategy ran, how carefully it had been executed, how her own trust had been weaponized against her child. Chloe's fingers tightened on her phone, scrolling through the messages again, reading the little threads that revealed the calculated narrative. The way Mabel described her as career-focused, cold, self-absorbed, it was all meant to reinforce the exclusions, to make other adults nod along in agreement, to legitimize the special treatment of Max and Ava while keeping Jennifer on the sidelines. The weight of the deception was almost crushing. She felt a knot of fury, anger simmering in her chest, mixed with a protective instinct so sharp it made her stomach twist. She could feel the adrenaline rising, her mind racing with possibilities, ways to respond, to shield Jennifer, to counter the manipulation. And yet, she had to be careful. Every step had to be measured. Every reaction had to protect her daughter first, without escalating the conflict in a way that would backfire. Chloe's internal monologue was a tangle of strategy and emotion. How do I make this right? How do I ensure Jennifer doesn't feel worthless, rejected, or unloved? How do I confront Mabel without turning this into a spectacle, without putting Jennifer in the line of fire? Her thoughts bounced from scenario to scenario, each one more detailed, more intricate, as she tried to map the course of action. And through it all, there was a growing awareness of just how deliberate Mabel's behavior had been, how carefully she had constructed this false narrative, how calculated her exclusions were. Chloe's shock began to give way to a resolute clarity. She could see the mechanics of the manipulation, the patterns, the consistency. She could trace the threads of deceit from year to year, each message from other parents adding another layer of understanding. And with that clarity came determination, a protective resolve that rooted her firmly in the role of advocate, defender, and ally for Jennifer. The anger that had initially flared now fueled a deliberate focus. Chloe realized that she couldn't allow these manipulations to continue unchecked. She had to act, not out of revenge, not out of spite, but out of love and duty. Jennifer deserved that much, deserved to know that she was valued and seen, regardless of Mabel's calculated narratives. Chloe took a deep breath, letting the mix of emotions settle into a controlled determination. She felt the tension in her shoulders, the tightness in her chest, but also the clarity of purpose. She would protect her daughter. She would support her. She would create a buffer between Jennifer and the manipulations, ensuring that the emotional toll that had quietly been building for years would not continue unchecked. and she reflected on the subtlety of Mabel's methods, the way manipulation could be wrapped in polite words and caring gestures, the way perception could be guided without overt cruelty, and the moral weight of countering it without becoming the aggressor. Chloe realized that this wasn't just about correcting past wrongs. It was about establishing a new narrative, one where Jennifer's value and happiness were front and center. She would be vigilant, intentional, and protective, even in the smallest moments. And Chloe also understood the emotional complexity for herself, how the knowledge of Mabel's deception stirred up old insecurities, fear of confrontation, and the need to navigate family dynamics with tact. But the underlying drive, the protective instinct for Jennifer, overrode it all. Chloe's mind turned over every birthday party, every gathering, every whispered excuse, every smile and deflection, and she began to catalog ways she could intervene, to counteract the manipulation in future events, to reclaim agency in a situation that had long felt out of her control. And through it all, she maintained the conversational, reflective voice she had with herself, acknowledging the frustration, the shock, the anger, but always channeling it toward action, toward protection, toward creating a world where Jennifer was seen and loved without qualification. The realization of Mabel's calculated nature was heavy, almost suffocating, but Chloe knew that understanding it was the first step toward empowerment. She could now anticipate, respond, and protect with intention. And that knowledge, while it carried the weight of betrayal, also carried the seed of resolution. She would not let her daughter be invisible, misrepresented, or diminished. The messages from other moms, once seemingly casual, had unveiled the deliberate pattern, the calculated exclusion, and Chloe felt a mixture of outrage and resolve that would shape every interaction moving forward. And as she held Jennifer close, reflecting on the subtle yet persistent manipulations, Chloe felt a clarity, a moral compass pointing firmly toward protection, love, and quiet, determined action. Her anger burned, but it was purposeful now, focused, guided. She would not falter. She would ensure her daughter's experience, her sense of worth, and her happiness were defended, no matter what schemes Mabel tried to weave in the background. Chloe knew the path ahead would be tense, tricky, and emotionally complex, but the clarity of the moment, the understanding of Mabel's manipulation, and the love she held for Jennifer gave her the resolve to navigate it with intention, care, and unwavering commitment. Chloe and Albert sat at the kitchen table, strewn with notebooks, colored pencils, and printouts of venues, decorations, and party supplies. They were plotting something big, something that would finally give Jennifer the celebration she deserved. Chloe could barely contain her excitement, though it was mixed with this undercurrent of strategic thinking. Every detail mattered not just for fun, but for showing, quietly but firmly, that Jennifer was valued, loved, and honestly, the center of attention for once. The venue had to feel magical, the kind of place where a 7-year-old could imagine herself as a princess. They settled on a small, charming hall with high ceilings and big windows that let in light, the kind of space that could be transformed into a fantasy kingdom. Chloe imagined Jennifer walking in, eyes wide, spinning in a dress that made her feel beautiful and important. and she had to remind herself to breathe. Albert leaned over, pointing to a mock-up of a banner, Princess Jennifer's Royal Celebration, in glittery, swirling letters. Chloe laughed softly, correcting a small mistake he'd made on the color scheme. The decorations were next flowers in soft pastels, twinkling fairy lights, a throne for Jennifer, even a little castle backdrop for photos. They were going for whimsy, charm, and a sense of grandeur without feeling overdone. Chloe scribbled notes in the margins, place cards, cupcakes with edible crowns, a piñata shaped like a unicorn, a craft table where kids could decorate their own wands. Albert chimed in with ideas too, his mind whirring with logistics and clever ways to make the day special. They argued gently over the order of activities, pausing to sip coffee, adjusting small details here and there. Chloe felt a flutter in her chest every time she thought about Jennifer's reaction. She imagined the smile, the laughter, the sheer joy of being celebrated instead of overlooked. Invitations were next. Chloe decided on handwritten cards, each one sealed with a wax stamp. She wanted it to feel personal, intentional, a little like stepping into a storybook. Albert suggested including a note for parents, gently clarifying that this wasn't just a party, it was a statement, a celebration of Jennifer's uniqueness, a subtle counter to the false narrative Mabel had been spinning. Chloe nodded. Yes, it had to feel joyful, not confrontational, but the underlying message needed to be clear. Jennifer mattered. The menu was another exciting detail. Chloe imagined cupcakes with sparkling sugar crowns, mini sandwiches, fruit skewers, and a cake that was both beautiful and delicious. Every bite, every detail had to reinforce the idea that this party was about joy, not optics. Chloe laughed quietly at herself, realizing she was nearly trembling at the thought of finally giving her daughter this recognition. The activities were designed with care too. A mini scavenger hunt through the royal gardens, a dance circle for all the kids, crown decorating, storytelling corners with fairy tales, all planned to make Jennifer feel seen and celebrated in every possible way. Chloe scribbled the last few notes, occasionally pausing, thinking about how Jennifer would run from activity to activity, spinning with delight, every moment a small triumph over the years of exclusion. And there were little human touches, too, small things that made it intimate and personal. A handwritten card from Chloe to Jennifer, telling her she was brave, kind, and loved. Albert suggested including a scrapbook for Jennifer to keep, pages ready for photos of the party, each picture a reminder of how special she was. Chloe felt a lump in her throat just imagining Jennifer flipping through it years from now, remembering this day as one where she was celebrated fully and unreservedly. They planned for music too, a mix of princess songs and Jennifer's favorite tunes, carefully curated to ensure that the soundscape was joyful, uplifting, and entirely about her. Chloe chuckled softly, remembering the little twirls Jennifer used to do in the living room, the way she would practice her step-step smile for family events. And now, she would have a whole party where every little spin, every squeal of delight would be honored and amplified. Even the seating arrangements were thoughtfully considered. Chloe wanted Jennifer surrounded by her friends, kids she felt comfortable with, and also some adult allies who would reinforce the celebration, not diminish it. She scribbled names in a notebook, checking off invitations, making sure that no one who had ever caused Jennifer pain would be included. Albert nodded approvingly, suggesting a few tweaks to ensure flow and accessibility for the children. Chloe smiled at him, grateful for the calm, strategic perspective he brought to her emotional whirlwind. They also discussed photography, wanting to capture the magic without turning it into a performance. Chloe wanted natural smiles, candid moments of joy, not staged perfection. Every snapshot would be a testament to Jennifer's value, a counter-narrative to the misrepresentations that had plagued her for years. Chloe felt a quiet thrill at the thought, imagining the photos lining the walls of their home, each one a small victory. And then came the little extras, the touches that made it unforgettable: glitter for the craft table, personalized water bottles, tiny crowns on napkins, a treasure chest for party favors. Every element was intentional, chosen to reinforce the feeling that Jennifer was central, celebrated, and deeply loved. Chloe paused for a moment, reflecting on the years of subtle exclusion, the manipulation, the half-truths, the careful politeness that masked real unfairness. And in that reflection, a determination crystallized. This party wouldn't just be fun, it would be a quiet, joyful reclaiming of space and recognition. It would be a celebration that said, without words, that Jennifer mattered, that she was worthy, that the narratives others had spun were false and inconsequential. Chloe felt the weight of it all, the responsibility to get it right, the emotional stakes high, but also a deep, steady joy at being able to finally give her daughter this moment. The planning stretched into the evening. They reviewed lists, made calls to vendors, confirmed timelines, and double-checked that every detail aligned with their vision. Chloe even paused to imagine Jennifer waking up that morning, the thrill of anticipation on her face, the unfiltered excitement that comes from being truly seen. Albert laughed softly, noticing Chloe's dreamy expression. "You're already picturing her reaction, aren't you?" he asked. Chloe nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I can't help it. I want it to be perfect for her. She deserves it." And that sentiment fueled every choice, every correction, every final adjustment. Chloe was both strategic and emotionally invested, mapping out a day that was beautiful, magical, and unmistakably for Jennifer. They debated over timing, when to bring out the cake, how to schedule the scavenger hunt, how to manage transitions between activities without stress. Chloe scribbled notes in the margins, adding reminders to pause, to soak in the moments, to not rush through the joy. And she thought about the broader impact too, the subtle counter-message to Mabel's lies. This party wasn't confrontational, but it was clear Jennifer was celebrated, loved, central. Chloe felt satisfaction, a quiet thrill, imagining how the narrative would finally be shifted, how Jennifer would experience validation not just through Chloe's words, but through the entire orchestrated day. There were small pauses in their planning, moments where Chloe just leaned back, letting the weight of the planning wash over her, breathing deeply, realizing how much this mattered. Every balloon, every cupcake, every glittering decoration carried meaning. Albert adjusted a schedule, checked a list, and Chloe realized how much she relied on him for grounding, for perspective, for support. They laughed over little details, like a mix-up in the invitation wording or the placement of the fairy lights, making sure even the tiniest moments contributed to the magic. Chloe felt her excitement building with each passing hour, tempered by strategy, by care, by attention to emotional stakes. She was orchestrating not just a birthday party, but a moment of recognition, inclusion, and joy that would leave a lasting impression on Jennifer and everyone who witnessed it. And as they finalized the last details, the vendor confirmations, the cake design, the craft table setup, Chloe felt a deep, steady sense of anticipation. She imagined Jennifer arriving, taking in the decorations, the music, the attention, and finally feeling, without question, that she was loved, valued, and celebrated. Chloe realized that this party was about more than balloons and cake. It was a statement, a reclamation, a chance to counter years of subtle exclusion with a day that radiated joy and affirmation. And in that, Chloe felt a surge of pride, relief, and love, ready to see her daughter at the center of a celebration that she had always deserved. A day orchestrated with care, strategy, and a deeply personal touch. The morning of Jennifer's party arrived bright and clear, sunlight streaming through the windows as Chloe buzzed around, making sure everything was exactly as planned. Jennifer was bouncing with excitement, practically vibrating with energy as she put on her princess dress. A soft pink gown with sparkling accents and a tiny tiara perched perfectly atop her curls. Chloe watched her carefully, her heart swelling with a mix of pride, relief, and anticipation. She whispered little affirmations to herself. This is it. Jennifer deserves this. Every detail, every effort, it's all for her. Albert arrived early with the last of the decorations and a stack of favors, and together they checked the banners, the throne, the table settings. The hall looked magical, almost like stepping into a storybook. Chloe couldn't stop smiling, and she could see Jennifer practically bouncing in place, hands clutched together in sheer delight. As the first guests began to arrive, Chloe felt a surge of calm confidence. The kids ran in, giggling, their parents chatting and smiling, clearly enjoying the festive atmosphere. Jennifer immediately dove into the excitement, leading her friends to the throne, twirling in her dress, her laughter pure and unrestrained. Chloe watched quietly from the sidelines, making small adjustments here and there, but mostly just soaking in the joy. This was the moment she had worked for, the payoff for years of careful planning and quiet vigilance. And then, just as the party hit its stride, the door opened. Mabel swept in, Max and Ava trailing behind her, a perfect picture of dramatic timing. Chloe's stomach tightened, a familiar flash of tension, but she forced herself to stay calm, to breathe, to not let Mabel's entrance derail the day. Mabel's eyes swept the room, taking in the decorations, the guests, the sparkling banners, and then they settled on Jennifer. Chloe saw the flicker of recognition, surprise, maybe even disbelief, cross her sister's face, and Chloe's own heart pounded not with fear, but with readiness. She was prepared for this confrontation, and she would not falter. Mabel's voice rang out, loud and controlled, announcing the arrival and leading her children to a central spot. Chloe stepped forward, calmly intercepting the path, meeting her sister's gaze with steady, measured eyes. "Mabel," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I'm glad you're here, but we need to have a moment." The room quieted almost immediately. Other parents and children glanced up, sensing the sudden tension, the weight of something important unfolding. Mabel's lips pressed into a thin line, her expression cool, calculating. "Chloe, it's just a party," she said, her tone almost dismissive. But Chloe didn't waver. "It is. But it's also important that Jennifer feels celebrated today. She deserves to be included fully, without exception." Her words were deliberate, calm, and assertive. She wasn't shouting, wasn't losing her composure. She was stating a truth, clearly, with authority. Mabel's gaze flickered between Jennifer and Chloe, her mouth opening and closing as if searching for a retort. But Chloe held her eye contact steadily. The other parents were watching now, the room filled with this low hum of curiosity and tension. Chloe felt the energy in the air, the collective anticipation of everyone sensing the weight of the moment. Jennifer, oblivious to the power dynamics, beamed at Chloe, her small face lit up with trust and excitement. That trust, that belief in her mother's protection, strengthened Chloe's resolve. "Jennifer is at the center of this celebration," Chloe continued, her voice firm but kind, "and she will not be overlooked. Today is about her joy, and everyone here understands that." A few parents nodded subtly, their expressions shifting from polite curiosity to quiet admiration. Chloe felt a subtle thrill of satisfaction. This wasn't just about the party, it was about standing up, not with anger or theatrics, but with calm certainty. Mabel opened her mouth again, and Chloe anticipated it. "Chloe, you're being dramatic," she said. But there was a slight falter in her voice, a hint of awareness that the dynamics had shifted. Chloe didn't rise to provocation. She simply met her sister's eyes, steady, unyielding. "It's not dramatic, it's necessary. Jennifer has spent years on the sidelines, and today she gets to be celebrated. That's all." The other parents were quiet, watching, and Chloe could feel the shift in the room. The power dynamics, the long-standing tension, were being recalibrated not with shouting or public shame, but through calm, undeniable assertion of truth. Mabel's posture stiffened, her eyes narrowing. But Chloe stood firm. She wasn't aggressive, she was unwavering. She allowed her calm confidence to fill the space, showing without words that she would not be moved from her intention to protect and honor her daughter. Slowly, Mabel stepped back, the tension in her shoulders relaxing just slightly. Chloe could see the calculation in her eyes, the recognition that the dynamic had shifted, that the narrative Mabel had controlled for so long was no longer unchallenged. Chloe exhaled slowly, allowing herself a tiny sense of relief, though she remained alert, ready for any further maneuver. And then she turned slightly, giving Jennifer a gentle nod, inviting her to step forward, to embrace the joy she had earned. Jennifer's eyes sparkled as she approached the throne, her laughter ringing clear, the embodiment of the celebration Chloe had envisioned. The other children followed, the games began, the music played, and the room's energy lifted into a light, magical buzz. Mabel watched, her face a complex mask of emotions, frustration, surprise, and the faintest trace of grudging respect. She spoke little, realizing that Chloe's assertiveness, paired with the inclusive environment, left her little room to maneuver, and all the while, the other parents observed, quietly noting Chloe's composed authority, the fairness and clarity of her stance, the way she had honored Jennifer fully without causing disruption. Chloe felt a rush of satisfaction, tempered by vigilance, The party continued, filled with joy, laughter, and playful chaos, and Chloe moved among the children, adjusting decorations, encouraging participation, sharing smiles, and observing Jennifer's radiant happiness. Every detail mattered, and Chloe soaked it in the twinkle in Jennifer's eyes as she twirled, the delighted squeals as she found hidden treasures in the scavenger hunt, the sense of wonder as she crowned herself queen for the day. Chloe could see the impact of her planning and assertiveness, the shift in perception not just for Mabel, but for everyone present. She felt a profound sense of validation, a quiet triumph that wasn't loud or aggressive, but deeply satisfying. The long-standing conflict, the years of subtle exclusion and manipulation, had found a resolution in this moment of clarity and assertion. Mabel, confronted with the undeniable joy and centrality of Jennifer, could do little more than observe. Chloe remained calm, guiding the party, subtly signaling that this was Jennifer's day, and no past narratives could diminish that truth. The tension gradually eased, replaced by the vibrant hum of celebration. Chloe glanced at Albert, who gave her a small, knowing smile, and she allowed herself a quiet laugh, a release of the pent-up energy of years of careful strategy and vigilance. The other parents began to engage more actively, joining in games, encouraging participation, and reinforcing the inclusive atmosphere Chloe had cultivated. Chloe felt a deep sense of satisfaction, not in confrontation, but in standing up, in creating a space where Jennifer was celebrated openly, fully, and joyfully. She realized in that moment that calm assertiveness, careful planning, and emotional clarity could achieve more than anger or spectacle. And as she watched Jennifer spin with her friends, crown slightly askew, face flushed with happiness, Chloe understood that every ounce of effort, every detail, every confrontation managed with poise had been worth it. The long-standing conflict, the quiet frustration, the careful vigilance all had led to this moment of unqualified joy. Chloe felt her chest swell with pride, love, and a profound sense of accomplishment. Jennifer had been celebrated, the truth had been affirmed, and the family dynamic, while complicated, had shifted toward recognition and respect. Chloe knew this day would stay with Jennifer, and with her, as a memory of joy, fairness, and the power of calm, determined action. Looking back on the party, Chloe and Jennifer finally felt free to laugh, spin, and just be themselves without worrying about exclusion or judgment. It was a reminder that standing up for your child, calmly and confidently, can make all the difference. The joy they shared that day was contagious, and it showed the power of love and patience. If this story resonated with you, feel free to like, subscribe, or share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear where you're watching from.